Don't make bad food at a family gathering.
Timothy, just taking one bite of the meal and knocked the dish off the table onto the ground, his angry voice echoing throughout the room. All the relatives gathered there were taken aback and stared at him in shock. I've never seen anyone throw food like that. I'm sure everyone was feeling the same way. Hey, what are you doing?
It's your fault, isn't it? Even though you're a housewife, you're making such lousy food at a time like this. Who could eat this?
Timothy sneered disdainfully. I looked at him with pity and said, I didn't make it.
What?
He looked stunned and just lost for words. Now, this is the perfect chance. Don't miss the chance to fight back against him, who has oppressed me all along. I took a deep breath and composed myself. My name is Natalie Adriana, 32 years old. Until a year ago, I worked for a condominium management company, but I quit my job when I got married, and now I'm a full-time housewife. Without Timothy's strong insistence, I would have continued working, but he really wanted me to be a full-time housewife as his wife. I accepted his request and quit my job. Honestly, I wanted to work a little longer, but considering his income, I thought we could make a living without me working. He works for a major consulting firm. We met through work. As we both were people in charge of each company, we got to know each other, started dating, and eventually got married. Having worked for various consulting firms right after graduating from college, he was good at his job and was a smooth talker. I was impressed by his work and approached him from me. I didn't think he would pay attention to someone like me, who was ordinary in looks and ability, but to my surprise, he responded to my feelings. I was so happy that I couldn't stop talking things about him to my friends after we started dating. I guess they were feeling I was silly, but I believed without any doubt that I was at the peak of happiness. When we decided to get married just over a year into our relationship, I was in a state of complete euphoria, unaware of what disasters lay ahead.
Listen, I'm busy with work on weekdays, so I'll only come home on weekends. Sorry, but that's how it's gonna be.
He casually announced as he was watching TV in the living room, on the very night we received our marriage certificate at the city office. Having been excited for our happy married life, I was utterly shocked by his unexpected words. What do you mean?
So, I'll only come home on Saturdays and Sundays. It'll help keep the excitement we had when we were lovers. It's a great idea, Hope.
Well, but...
What? You got a problem with that?
No, I don't. I was honestly taken aback by his sudden proposal. Only coming home on weekends. Isn't that what they call a weekend marriage? It's strange to decide something so important all by himself. If he really wanted a weekend marriage, he should have at least mentioned it before we got married. Why did he have to declare it suddenly on the very day we received our marriage certificate? It's true that seeing each other less often might keep the excitement alive. But isn't it natural to want to be with the person you love all the time? My newlywed life was a big disappointment, and I felt more downcast than I had expected. He must have noticed my state, or maybe he was just trying to improve my mood, but he treated me unusually kindly that day. That night, we had our first night as a married couple, and as a result, I was able to temporarily forget about a weekend marriage, so maybe his plan worked successfully. Looking back now, his declaration at that time was just the beginning. I had no idea that I would experience even more difficult challenges than just a weekend marriage afterward. 2 months into our marriage, just as he had announced beforehand, he only came home on weekends. As a housewife, I wanted to cook dinner to my husband, who came home tired every day, but my enthusiasm quickly faded. Even on weekends when he came home, sometimes he would eat out by himself. So, he has hardly ever tasted anything I've made. I have been subtly suggesting for a while, asking should we stop this weekend marriage. But he has been pushing my opinions aside, saying arrogantly, you're just a housewife. How dare you go against me? As if he were the most important person in this household. It's true that I am a housewife, but that's what he wanted. I now realize that he made me quit my job could have control over our domestic life. He led me not to resist his orders by making me financially dependent on him. That must have been his plan all along. At night, when I got into bed, tears of frustration welled up. How did this come about? I just wanted to have a happy married life. It's too late to lament now. I have no choice but to patiently wait until he changes his mind. I felt like I had been thrown into a tunnel. I could not see the light at the end and was filled with anxiety. As we entered the 3rd month of our marriage, he started coming home only occasionally, even on weekends. This is not what we agreed upon. Is there any point in being married when we hardly ever see each other? Honey, can't we talk about our life together again? I mustered up the courage to ask him again on a Friday evening. Timothy smelled of alcohol. Maybe he had been drinking with his coworkers. At the same time, I smelled a sweet scent like jasmine filled the air. I was taken aback. No, it couldn't be.
I've told you countless times already. I have no intention of coming back now.
Even though he was drunk, he continued to assert his position as usual. But things have changed from our initial agreement. You said we'd spend weekends together. What about now? You don't come back on weekends anymore, do you? Besides, I wasn't really satisfied with it from the beginning. When I said that, his face turned red. I realized right away that he got upset.
How many times do I have to tell you? I absolutely won't compromise. Seriously, why do you keep complaining so much? Maybe you should understand your place for once.
His attitude had changed drastically from before we got married, and he didn't seem to care about me at all. That made me sad beyond anger. Why did he even bother marrying me? I couldn't bear it any longer, so when I heard the sound of Timothy, who retreated to his own room, got out from his room and entered the bath, I crawled out from my bed and sneaked into his room. I didn't want to do something like this, but I couldn't stand being at his mercy any longer. I desperately searched his room for evidence, hoping to find something. And then, for the next few months, we continued to practically live apart, just as before. I stopped saying anything to him, who hardly ever came home. There was something else that bothered me more, so I decided to live quietly for now. Then, one day, my phone received a call. It was from Timothy's mother. I hadn't seen her since I met her to meet his parents when we got married. I wondered what she wanted all of a sudden and picked up the phone. Hello?
Natalie. It's me.
Oh, hello. How are you doing? In the background, I could hear a noisy crowd, as if she were at a supermarket or something.
It's almost Christmas. Are you two coming, right? All the relatives will get together, so I want you to join us too, Natalie.
Oh, you're talking about Christmas. Yes, I'd be happy to come, but I suspected that she might know something about Timothy, so I decided to ask her a question. Have you talked to Timothy recently?
Timothy. Oh, I've talked to him many times. I've been contacting him a lot because I was worried about him since he finally got married. But it seems like his married life is going well.
What? I was puzzled what she was saying. His married life is going well. Is that what Timothy told her? What part of this weekend marriage is going well? However, it clicked after a moment of thought. He must be deliberately lying to her, saying that our married life was going smoothly. She is the type to worry about her son for everything, which can be described as caring or overprotective, depending on how you look at it. Even though I've only met her once, it was clear how she doted on her son from the conversation during our first meeting. No offense, but I think what Timothy told you is all lies, actually. I told her that he had declared from the beginning of our marriage that he would only come home on weekends. And recently, even on weekends, we hardly ever saw each other.
What are you talking about, Natalie? Timothy would never do such a thing. Are you trying to deceive me with lies? Who do you think you are?
She responded with anger to my confession, raising her voice on the other end of the phone. I sighed. I knew she was someone like this. She only believes her son's words. She never doubts that he might be lying. If anyone says something negative about him, even if it's his wife, she'll attack her thoroughly. That's how she operates. I'm not lying. If you're concerned, I can record the inside of the house for a month and show it to you. But she refused, saying, "You don't need to do such embarrassing things. You're the worst daughter-in-law." She hung up without believing me at all. I had a feeling that it would turn out like this. My Phil is a taciturn person, so I don't know what he thinks of me. But my Mill probably thinks of me as nothing more than a convenient marriage partner for Timothy. Once I understood that, I felt tired of continuing my marriage with Timothy like this, and I decided to put my plan into action, which I had been thinking about for a while. The day of action would be the Christmas, the day when Timothy's relatives would gather at his parents' house. I didn't know what would happen, but I would do everything I could. Quietly in my heart, I burned with determination. Christmas arrived, and as promised, Timothy and I headed to his parents' house. When we left the house, I contacted someone. Timothy, who knew nothing about it, reluctantly prepared and left our house, saying, "Ick, such a hassle to go meet my relatives." When we arrived at his parents' house, his uncles, aunts, and cousins, as well as his parents, were gathered. And there was a woman who appeared to be a housekeeper preparing food in the kitchen. The housekeeper, wearing glasses and a mask, did not join our conversation and simply carried out her work. With so many people, I couldn't sort out who was who in my head.
Oh, Natalie. Welcome to our home.
Although my Mill welcomed me with a smile, but her eyes weren't smiling. She seemed to have lost all trust in me since our previous phone call. I forced a smile and greeted her with Merry Christmas. After that, I didn't exchange any more words with her, and the preparations for the meal continued. I was also helping prepare various things in the kitchen. My Phil remained silent as usual, sitting on the sofa and reading a newspaper. Once the meal was ready and I finished serving and everyone began to eat, I noticed Timothy next to me, going to eat the stew. I was about to eat my meal as well, feeling hungry.
Hey, how could you make such terrible food like this for a family gathering?
There was a loud crash of a breaking dish, and everyone was startled by the sudden sound. Timothy, who had only taken one bite of the meal that had been served, made a loud angry noise throughout the room. Everyone gathered there looked at him in shock. I've never seen anyone throw food on the floor before. I'm sure everyone felt the same way. Hey, what are you doing?
It's your fault, isn't it? You're a housewife, and you make such lousy meal at a time like this. Who could eat something like this?
He sneered at me. I gave him a pitying look and said, "But I didn't make it."
Huh?
He looked stunned and just lost for words. Now's the time. Now is the perfect chance. I can't miss this chance to fight back against him, who has oppressed me all along. I took a deep breath and composed myself.
What are you talking about? You were in the kitchen preparing the meal just now.
Timothy mocked me, looking at me with a face like I don't understand. That's true. I was in the kitchen, but the housekeeper was there too, right? I was just preparing tableware. The one who made the meal was the housekeeper, right? I glanced at the housekeeper, who was supposed to be resting in the back room. She had come out unnoticed, and all the relatives looked stunned.
Yes, that's correct.
See, by the way, this housekeeper, I was the one who hired her. Let me introduce her to you. She's my mother. The housekeeper, or rather, my mother, took off her glasses and mask. Seeing her face, both Timothy and his parents were taken aback. They, of course, knew my mother's face, so they must have been surprised, wondering why she was here.
Wait, weren't you the housekeeper Timothy hired?
I didn't know. There's no way I'd prepare anything like that.
It seemed that my mill had thought Timothy had hired the housekeeper, and she was trembling with shock. Timothy, you know what my mother does, right? She works at a high-class restaurant and makes delicious meals every day. But today, I had her made a home-cooked meal with a light taste. I wonder why you thought I made it.
Well, it's because you were in the kitchen until just now.
Timothy raised his voice, irritated by my question. Indeed, it might be natural to think that I, who had been in the kitchen, had prepared the meal with my mother. However, Timothy, who hardly ever ate my cooking, didn't know. My cooking is often strongly seasoned, unlike the meal my mother prepared today, which is lightly seasoned. I prefer strong flavors, so I use plenty of seasoning. That might be true, but the main reason is that you've hardly ever eaten my cooking.
What?
What does it mean?
Everyone present, except for Timothy, looked at me with wide eyes, not understanding. Timothy turned pale and froze in shock. I had decided to reveal his dishonesty here and now. On the day Timothy and I received our marriage certification, he declared to me, "I won't come home on weekdays. We'll only spend time together on weekends. It's what they call a weekend marriage." He didn't mention anything like that before we got married. I was shocked. I couldn't accept it, but every time I tried to oppose or discuss it, he insisted on, "Don't defy me, you're just a housewife." He wouldn't listen to my opinion. As the truth of our married life unfolded one after another, the relatives looked shocked. Especially my mill yelled at me, as if she wanted to say not that lie again.
That can't be true. Are you still saying such things? Timothy always reports to me that you guys are living happily together. Please don't embarrass us in front of our relatives like this.
Seeing my mill, who always takes her son's side, raged with face like thunder on his behalf, I sighed, fed up. It's about time. It's about time to reveal that. Just as I steeled myself, clenching my fists tightly. "Timothy, are you here?" A voice of an unfamiliar woman came from the entrance, making all the relatives startled. At the same time as one relative said, "What's that?" the living room door opened, and a woman peered in. She was about 20 years old, wearing a short skirt, bright red nail polish, with glossy hair. She looked around at the many people in the living room, then opened her eyes wide and said, "Huh," in a dumbfounded voice.
Timothy, what's going on?
The woman, who called out Timothy in a sweet, cajoling tone, looked around in confusion, wondering what was happening. Everyone except me seemed unable to grasp the situation.
Myler, why are you here?
Timothy's mistress, Mila, shrugged with an even more bewildered expression at Timothy's surprise.
Why? Because you called me here. You said you wanted to introduce me to your parents as your fiancé.
What? When did I ever say that?
It was 2 weeks ago. Don't you remember?
When she showed Timothy the message exchange between them, he was taken aback.
I never sent this.
Huh? Then who sent it?
As the two of them argued with each other, I took a step forward. "Nice to meet you. I'm Timothy's wife. I'm the one who invited you here today. I'm sorry, Timothy, but I sent the message without telling you."
What?
What?
Both of them were dumbfounded at the same time. Yes. In fact, ever since I received a phone call from my mill inviting us for Christmas, I had been waiting for the right moment to strike back at Timothy. And 2 weeks ago, while he was taking a bath late at night, I sneaked out of the bedroom and grabbed his smartphone. Seeing his frequent contact with Mila, it was obvious she was his mistress. To catch Timothy and Mila red-handed, I had lied and lured her here today. The relatives who heard our conversation began to buzz. My in-laws' faces turned pale. I had a feeling something was strange. Why did he start living a life where he only comes home on weekends right after marrying me? I wondered if there was any point in getting married if we hardly ever saw each other, even though we were married. I thought if he really loved me, he wouldn't live like this.
That's because I'm busy with work. I've told you many times.
Even at this point, he still tried to resist. I sighed deeply, fed up with him. Work? Well, at first, I believed that. But then, when you came home at night, I smelled like perfume on you. I thought there was something fishy and decided to investigate.
What? What do you mean by investigate?
He suddenly started to shiver. I took out the infidelity investigation report from the detective agency that I had hidden in my bag and thrust it in front of Timothy and the woman. I had suspected his infidelity and had recently hired a detective agency to investigate. The evidence of his infidelity was quickly found, and that's how I had gathered a large amount of evidence. The relationship started 5 years ago. At that time, Mila was only 15 years old. You picked her up on the street and started dating her. But of course, you couldn't marry a child like her. Besides, she is currently working for a hostess club. So, you didn't think your parents would approve. But you had felt pressured by your parents to get married soon. So, you caught a safe woman like me and got married to shut them up. And then, you continued the relationship with her in secret. Sooner or later, you were planning to divorce me, citing the excuse like you were busy with work or something, and marry her, right? I exposed their infidelity by piecing together the information I had learned from the detective agency's report and the contents of Timothy and Mila's messages.
What are you talking about? Timothy would never.
My mill, who was trying to support Timothy, seemed unable to say anything more in the face of the evidence I presented and felt deflated in defeat. Timothy and Mila looked at each other, trembling. Then Timothy spoke up.
This is unfair. You're using such dirty tactics to discredit us. That's despicable.
His words filled me with so much anger that I felt like my blood vessels were about to burst, and I yelled, "Unfair? What are you talking about? The unfair one is you, who, right after marrying me, stopped coming home on weekdays. You approached me while you had someone else, used me, and now blamed me while shutting your eyes to what you did to me. You've been just waiting for me to get fed up and initiate a divorce, weren't you? But too bad. Of course, I'll divorce you, but you'll pay alimony properly. And you too, Mila? I glared at Timothy and Mila with the most intimidating look I've ever given.
Oh, why me? I don't have any money.
Please, I beg you. I was run. So, please spare me just the alimony.
I glared at the two again, who were begging for mercy now, and shouted, "Just get out of here right now." They, upon hearing my scream, finally let out a cry and left the house. I apologize for the disturbance, everyone. As I stood tall and apologized sincerely, a collective sigh escaped from among the relatives. Everyone was stunned by Timothy's actions, at a loss for words.
Natalie, I don't know what to say.
My Mill, who had believed Timothy and criticized me, looked awkward as she looked down. I left my in-laws' house together with my mother, who had been pretending to be a housekeeper. I probably won't be coming to this house again. Thus, my one-year marriage life that I had been plagued by Timothy had come to an end. A few days later, I began the divorce proceedings with Timothy. I would be officially single again. Now I am a divorcee, but our marriage was so brief and hardly felt like a real marriage, so it didn't feel like much had changed. Since we were living in a rented apartment, I managed to get rid of Timothy by asking him to leave. After that, he did pay me the alimony that I had demanded, but apparently he didn't have enough savings, so he asked his relatives to lend him some. Despite working for a prestigious company, he had no money because he had been lavishing expensive brand bags and clothes on his mistress. However, they, who had witnessed the Christmas incident, would never lend him any money. Having no choice, he ended up taking out a loan from the bank. His mistress did the same, taking out a loan to pay the alimony. Both of them were now struggling with repaying their loans. It forced them to postpone their plan to get married. At least until they pay off their debts, both sets of parents are adamant that they shouldn't get married. I suppose Timothy's parents, in particular, had enough of getting entangled in their troubles. They deserve to struggle to repay their debts. Compared to the 1 year of suffering I had endured, it was easy for them. Just to earn money and pay it back, I thought, like somebody else's business. On the other hand, I returned to my previous job at a condominium management company and am now enjoying my work. It's much better for my mental health than staying holed up at home. If I ever decide to marry again, I've quietly resolved to choose someone who would be okay with both of us working.